the extraordinary African-American woman educator, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune.
A hero is someone who is dedicated, courageous, and determined. Determination means that a person is persistent and does not give up on his or her goals. Courage is a strong willingness to take a chance to complete the goal, and dedication is commitment to stick to the goal and not to stop until it is reached. So on July 10th, 1875, woman is an example of a hero that possessed all three of these traits was born. She was an African-American educator and civil rights leader who is best known for starting the first African-American student school in Daytona Beach, Florida, that became Bethune-Cookman University. All heroes must be dedicated to something, and for her, it was to help people.
She was probably one of the most influential African-American educators and civil rights figures during the first half of the 20th century.
She said, one day you're going to be a woman, and you will have to help to make little girls women. I couldn't imagine that. But as she talked, it became more and more a part of me. I would become a woman. I would be speaking to little girls. And I think back now I've spoken all over the world. Africa, Asia, Europe, South America.
She was a woman who showed her determination trait by working as a civil rights leader to end discrimination and allow all students, including African-American students, to obtain an education. Her name is Mary Jane McLeod Bethune.
But here's the point. While folk may think that I was totally enamored of Dr. Bethune as an educator, what really turned me on was the way she wore a hat. Dr. Bethune could wear a hat.
Born Mary Jane McLeod on July 10, 1875, she was an African-American educator, stateswoman, philanthropist, humanitarian, and civil rights activist, best known for starting the first private school for African-American students in Daytona Beach, Florida, and co-founding UNCF on April 25, 1944.
Now, I was born in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. Dr. Bethune, one of 17 children coming out of slavery, founded a school which became Bethune-Cookman College. It is now Bethune-Cookman University. I was very privileged as a youngster to know Dr. Bethune. I mean, literally, to sit on her lap.
She was a woman who attracted donations of time and money and developed the academic school as a college. She was also appointed as a national advisor to the President Franklin D. Roosevelt as part of what was known as his Black Cabinet.
And she used Bethune-Cookman as her base to be involved in women's work, to be involved in politics, to be involved in civil rights.
Mary was born in 1875 in a small log cabin near Maysville, South Carolina, on a rice and cotton farm in Sumter County. She was the 15th of 17 children born to Sam and Patsy McIntosh McLeod, both farmer slaves. Most of her siblings had been born into slavery. Her mother worked for her former master, and her father farmed cotton near a large village they called the homestead. Her parents wanted to be independent, so they had sacrificed to buy a farm for the family. As a child, Mary would accompany her mother to deliver white people's wash. Allowed to go into the white children's nursery, Mary became fascinated with their toys. One day, she picked up a book, and as she opened it, a white child snatched it away from her. Babbling she didn't know how to read, Mary decided then that the only difference between white and colored people was the ability to read and write, and she was inspired to learn.
There's little about her beginnings that would suggest that she would go on to be one of the most powerful women in America. And Bethune tells the account in her autobiography that at some point she developed an ability to read and to write, and not many people knew it. And she was visiting a home where her mother was taking in wash, and she picked up a book, and someone ridiculed her immediately and said, "Put that down. You can't read that," when in fact she could. And she knew that moment was a suggestion to her that there was something perhaps powerful about literacy and perhaps powerful about education that she wanted to master. And I think from that very beginning, she realized that one could not be fully free until you were educated.
Mary attended Mayersville's one-room black schoolhouse, Trinity Mission School, which was run by the Presbyterian Board of Missions of Freedmen. She was the only child in her family to attend school, so each day she taught her family what she had learned. To get to and from school, Mary walked 5 miles each day. A teacher, Emma Jane Wilson, became a significant mentor in her life. Wilson had attended Scotia Seminary, and she helped Mary attend the same school on a scholarship, which she did from 1888 to 1893. The following year, she attended Dwight L. Moody's Institute for Home and Foreign Missions in Chicago, hoping to become a missionary in Africa. When Mary was told that black missionaries were not needed, she planned to teach, as education was a prime goal among African Americans.
2 months later, I was going to school. And after I finished school, I would come home and teach my siblings. And I even had my grandma crying because I was reading the Bible. And after that, when I finished school, I had to come back and work on the farm, and I taught some neighbors how to read. And then Mrs. Wilson came back and said I had a scholarship to go to Concord, North Carolina to finish my education. God is good. I was on my way.
Mary married Albertus Bethune in 1898. They moved to Savannah, Georgia, when she did social work until the Bethunes made the move to Florida. They had a son named Albert Coyden Harold Ugams. A visiting Presbyterian minister persuaded the couple to relocate to Palatka, Florida, to run a mission school. The Bethunes moved in 1899. Mary ran the mission school and began an outreach to prisoners. Albertus left the family in 1907. He never got a divorce, but relocated to South Carolina and died in 1918 from tuberculosis. Mary worked as a teacher briefly at her former elementary school in Sumter County. In 1896, she began teaching at Haynes Normal and Industrial Institute in Augusta, Georgia, which was part of a Presbyterian mission organized by Northern congregations. It was founded and run by Lucy Crafts Lonnie. As a daughter of former slaves, Lonnie ran her school with a Christian missionary zeal, emphasizing character and practical education for girls. She also accepted the boys who showed up eager to learn. Lonnie's mission was to imbue Christian moral education in her students to arm them for their life challenges.
During the summers, I used to do a lot of Vesper services and camps. And during the summer, I worked as a Sunday school missionary. That's when I got to know Mary McLeod Bethune personally. She and I used to sit on the porch, and she talked to me all the time about what is your goal in life. She's a forthright person. She just comes right out and asks you the things or tells you the things that she wants you to know. I felt very, very comfortable and sought her out as a mentor.
Of her year at learning school, Mary said, "I was so impressed with her fearlessness, her amazing touch in every respect, an energy that seemed inexhaustible, and a mighty power to command respect and admiration from her student and all who knew her. She handled her domain with the act of a master." Mary adopted many of Lonnie's educational philosophies, including our emphasis on educating girls and women to improve the conditions of black people. I believe that the greatest hope for the development of my race lies in training our women thoroughly and practically. After 1 year at Haynes, Mary was transferred by the Presbyterian Mission to the Kindle Institute in Sumter, South Carolina. After her marriage and moved to Florida, Mary became determined to start a school for girls.
I cannot believe me, Mary McLeod Bethune, had a meeting with the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. It was wonderful. She started me off laughing. She said, "Mary, I know you're an educator." She said, "but I've heard rumors that you're quite a beggar. I want to know, what is this about you begging, and how and why would you build a school?" I said, "Miss Roosevelt, I went to Daytona Beach and I looked up an old friend of mine and I told her I wanted to build a school for young girls. And she was very skeptical about it, but she said, 'Mary, you go on and you do what you want to do, and you can stay with me as long as you want.'"
Mary moved from Pilot's Car to Daytona because it had more economic opportunity. It had become a popular tourist destination and businesses were thriving. In October 1904, she rented a small house for $11 per month. She made benches and desks from discarded crates and acquired other items through charity. Mary used $1.50 to start the Educational and Industrial Training School for Negro girls. She initially had 6 students, 5 girls aged 6 to 12, and her son Albert. The school bordered Daytona's dump. Mary, parents of students, and church members raised money by making sweet potato pies, ice cream, and fried fish and selling them to crews at the dump.
I started looking for a cottage, and after quite a bit of inquiring and walking, I found what I thought was an empty cottage, and I asked this man, "Do you know how much that cottage rents for?" And he said, "Well, that's my cottage, and I charge $11 a month." And I told him what I wanted to use the cottage for. I said, "And I don't have the money until I start the school." He said, "Don't worry about it. The money can wait." I got excited, and immediately I started running around knocking on doors and begging for brooms and broken furniture, broken dishes, for sponges to help with this school. I saw a few men sitting around doing nothing, and I had to beg them, because they didn't want to do it. I had to beg them to help me build tables, chairs, and desks out of old wooden crates I had found at the dump heap. But they did it. I feel like that is one of the most important jobs I have, is to beg for what I need for my girls. And I went running to different churches on my bike, getting donations and going to clubs. And finally the time came to where we could open the school. I had 5 little girls, each paying 50 cents a week to attend the school.
Early days, the student made ink for pens from elderberry juice and pencils from burnwood. They asked local businesses for furniture. Mary later wrote, "I considered each cash as the smallest part of my resources. I had faith in a loving God, faith in myself, and a desire to serve." The school received donations of money, equipment, and labor from local black churches. Within a year, Mary was teaching more than 30 girls at the school. Mary also courted wealthy white organizations, such as the Ladies' Palmetto Club. She invited influential white men to sit on a school board of trustees, gaining participation by James Gamble and Thomas H. White. When Booker T. Washington of Tuskegee Institute visited in 1912, he advised her of the importance of gaining support by white benefactors for funding the rigorous curriculum.
Booker T. Washington came to visit, and he was so impressed with our expansion and what we were doing. And when he left, he was telling everybody about what we were doing at Daytona Beach.
And the girls rise at 5:30 a.m. for Bible study. The classes in home economics and industrial skills such as dressmaking, millinery, cooking, and other crafts emphasize a life of self-sufficiency for them as women. Student days ended at 9 p.m. Soon Mary added science and business courses, then high school level courses of math, English, and foreign languages. Mary was always seeking donations to keep her school operating. As she traveled, she was fundraising.
And I sat down and I started writing letters to folks that I thought might have a lot of spare money and some that just had a little spare money, asking them to please help us with some donations. You know, it takes faith and you have to believe. And I'm a believer. I think I'm about the strongest believer you'll ever meet. And I know if you ask, God will provide. So I put faith and believing hand in hand. And that's why when we finished building our first dormitory, it was appropriate to name it Faith Hall.
A donation of $62,000 by John D. Rockefeller helped, as he did her friendship with Franklin D. Roosevelt and his wife, beginning in the 1930s, who gave her entry to a progressive network. In 1931, the Methodist Church helped the merger of her school with the Boys Cookman Institute, forming the Bethune Cookman College, a co-educational junior college, and Mary became president. Through the Great Depression, Bethune Cookman School continued to operate and meet the educational standards of the state of Florida. From 1936 to 1942, Mary had to cut back her time as president because her duties in Washington, D.C. Funding declined during this period of her absence. But by 1941, the college had developed a 4-year curriculum and achieved full college status. By 1942, Mary gave up the presidency as her health was being adversely affected by her many responsibilities. On September 1942, she gave the address at the Los Angeles, California launching ceremony for the Liberty ship Booker T. Washington, a ceremony in which Marian Anderson christened the ship. As of the early 1900s, Daytona Beach, Florida was lacking a hospital that would help people of color. Mary had the idea to start a hospital after an incident involving one of her students. She was called to the bedside of the young female student who fell ill with acute appendicitis. It was clear that the student needed immediate medical attention, yet there was no local hospital to take her to that would treat black people. Mary demanded that a white physician at the local hospital help the girl. When Mary went to visit her student, she was asked to enter through the back door at the hospital. She found that her student had been neglected, ill-cared for, and segregated on an outdoor porch. Out of that experience, Mary decided that the black community in Daytona needed a hospital.
Then one of my children got ill. She was very sick and we had to rush her to the hospital. And when we got her to the hospital, they didn't want to take care of her because it was a whites-only hospital, but the doctor knew she may not make it to the next hospital, so he went on and he operated. I went to see that child the next day, and they walked me through the whole hospital all the way to the back. And then they take me out on the back porch, and that child is laying on a cot on the back porch. I was so angry because there were so many empty beds, and I said, we're building a hospital. And we did.
She founded a cabin near the school, and through sponsors helping her raise money, she purchased it for $5,000. In 1911, Mary opened the first black hospital in Daytona, Florida. It started with 2 beds and within a few years had 20. Both white and black physicians worked at the hospital, along with Mary's student nurses. The hospital went to save many black lives within the 20 years that it operated.
We built this hospital and we added to our curriculum, and by adding to our curriculum, we had nurses ready to serve in the hospital right there on the property.
During that time, both black and white people in the community relied on the help from the McLeod Hospital. After an explosion at a nearby construction site, the hospital took an injured black workers. The hospital and its nurses were also praised for their efforts with the 1918 influenza outbreak. During this outbreak, The hospital was full and had to overflow into the school's auditorium. In 1931, Daytona's public hospital, Halifax, did not agree to open a separate hospital for people of color, and black people did not fully integrate to the public hospital's main location until the 1960s. In 1896, the National Association of Colored Women, NACW, was formed to promote the needs of black women. Mary served as a Florida chapter president of the NACW from 1917 to 1925. She worked to register black voters, which was resisted by white society and had been made almost impossible by a variety of obstacles in Florida law and processes controlled by white administrators. Mary also served as the president of the Southeastern Federation of Colored Women's Club from 1920 to 1925.
Yes, Mrs. Bethune had been the 7th president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, and she said, we do not need another federation of local clubs. What we need is, and she said, the Negro woman, the trained and the untrained alike, stands outside of America's mainstream of opportunity, influence, and power. And what we need is an organization that brings the organizations together. So she founded the National Council of Negro Women as a council of national organizations. We later organized local groups, but those groups are not like a federation. They are chartered by the national body.
She worked to improve opportunities for black women. She was elected as national president of the NACW in 1924. While the organization struggled to raise funds for regular operations, Mary envisioned it acquiring a headquarters and hiring a professional executive secretary. She implemented these when NACW bought a property at 1318 Vermont Avenue in Washington, D.C. She led it to be the first black-controlled organization with headquarters in the capital. Gaining a national reputation in 1928, Mary was invited to attend the Child Welfare Conference called by Republican President Calvin Coolidge. In 1930, President Herbert Hoover appointed her to the White House Conference on Child Health.
The vision that I recall in hearing about her story and the impact that she had is one of her sitting around her dining room table and Negro at the time, or black as they were called, powerful figures in Washington, D.C., sitting around this table with her, strategizing, planning, negotiating, and these people became the black cabinet. Mainly black men and one black woman. Can you imagine the impact that she had, the influence that she must have had on these people to be able to talk to them and coach them, and then they take action in a male-dominated society at that time?
The Southeastern Federation of Colored Women's Club elected Mary as president after its first conference in 1920 at the Tuskegee Institute. They intended to reach out to Southern women, specifically white women, for support and unity in gaining rights for black women. The women met in Memphis, Tennessee, to discuss interracial problems. In many respects, all of the women agreed about what needed to be changed until they came to the topic of suffrage. The white women at the conference tried to strike down a resolution on black suffrage. The SACWC responded, issuing a pamphlet entitled Southern Negro Women and Race Cooperation. It delineated their demands regarding conditions in domestic service, child welfare, conditions of travel, education, lynching, the public press, and voting rights. The group went on to help register black women to vote after they were granted suffrage a few months later. After passage of the constitutional amendment within the state, however, and in other southern states, black men and women were largely disenfranchised by discriminatory application of literacy and comprehension tests, as well as requirement to pay poll taxes, lengthy residency requirement, and the need to keep and display records. In 1935, Mary founded the National Council of Negro Women, in New York City, bringing together representatives of 28 different organizations to work to improve the lives of black women and their communities.
I think you must then think about the Negro Women's Club movement, which is what Dr. Bethune started or helped to start. Now, one more thing. Dr. Bethune would often give talks at luncheon of black women, Hasidic black women, who would come with their gloves and their hats and their pearls, and Dr. Bethune would come no less with her hat and her pearls and her gloves. But she had a lesson for her sisters. She would often begin by saying, "My sisters, you've got to stop playing so much bridge, and you've got to start building bridges back into the communities that you have come from." Dr. Bethune would say, "My sisters, go ahead, climb to the very top of your profession. You have every right to be on top, but you must remember to lift others as you climb." And so Dr. Bethune was not only a great educator, she not only gave willingly, generously of herself to her community and to her nation, she believed in service as being at the core of leadership.
Mary said that of the Council, it is our pledge to make a lasting contribution to all that is finest and best in America, to cherish and enrich her heritage of freedom and progress by working for the integration of all her people regardless of race, creed, or national origin into a spiritual, social, cultural, civic, and economic life, and thus aid her to achieve the glorious destiny of a true and unfettered democracy. In 1938, the NCNW hosted the White House Conference on Negro Women and Children, demonstrating the importance of black women in democratic roles. During World War II, the NCNW gained approval for black women to be commissioned as officers in the Women's Army Corps. Mary also served as a political appointee and a special assistant to the Secretary of War during the war. In the 1990s, the headquarters for the National Council for Negro Women moved to Pennsylvania Avenue, centrally located between the White House and the U.S. Capitol.
For the fact that she was always in front of the gun somewhere in Washington. And I read about her. That was before she really got involved with the projects. But she was always in somebody's face in Congress. And I just thought, oh, she's a great guy. I just want to be around her. African-American women, yes. She was way out front. And she wasn't hesitant about it. No reserve, you got to hear what I'm going to say. And I'm going to say it, whether you hear it or not. You might hear it and not hear it, but I'm going to say it. And she made it very, very plain that she was not mincing her words. I love that about her.
The National Youth Administration, NYA, was a federal agency created under Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration, WPA. It provided programs specifically to promote relief and employment for young people. It focused on unemployed citizens aged 16 to 25 years who were not in school. Mary lobbied the organization to aggressively and effectively for minority involvement, as she earned a full-time staff position in 1936. As an assistant, within 2 years, Mary was appointed to a position of Director of the Division of Negro Affairs, and as such, became the first African-American female division head. She managed NYA funds to help black students through school-based programs. She was the only black agent of the NYA who was a financial manager. She ensured black colleges participating in the civilian pilot training program, which graduated some of the first black pilots. Mary's determination helped national officials recognize the need to improve employment for black youth. Within the administration, Mary advocated for the appointment of black NYA officials to positions of political power. Mary's administrative assistants served as liaisons between the National Division of Negro Affairs and the NYA agencies on the state and local levels. The high number of administrative assistants composed a workforce commanded by Mary. They helped gain a better job and salary opportunities for blacks across the country. During her tenure, Mary also pushed federal officials to approve a program for consumer education for blacks and a foundation for black crippled children. She planned for studies for black workers' education councils. National officials did not support these due to inadequate funding and fear of duplicating the work of private, non-governmental agencies, and the NYA was terminated in 1943. Mary became a close and loyal friend of Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt at the Southern Conference on Human Welfare in 1938, held in Birmingham, Alabama. Eleanor Roosevelt requested a seat next to Mary despite state segregation laws. Roosevelt frequently referred to Mary as her closest friend in her age group.
By the way, she was a very, very close friend of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. A friendship that has continued to intrigue me. I'm very interested in friendships that cross lines of difference. Men and women, black folk, white folk, young folk, old folk. Theirs was a very deep, special friendship. You may also remember that Dr. Bethune became something like an unofficial member of the cabinet of President Franklin Roosevelt. So when Dr. Bethune wanted to see the President of the United States, she didn't call up his secretary. She called up her friend Eleanor. And she'd just say, "Eleanor, I understand the president wants to see me." And Eleanor would go to the president and say, "Franklin, I understand you want to see Mary." They had a thing going on about the president of the United States.
Mary told black voters about the work being done on their behalf by the Roosevelt administration and made the concerns known to the Roosevelt. She had unprecedented access to the White House through her relationship with the First Lady. She used her access to form a coalition of leaders from black organizations called the Federal Council of Negro Affairs, but which came to be known as the Black Cabinet. It served as an advisory board to the Roosevelt administration on issues facing black people in America. It was composed of numerous talented blacks, mostly men, who had been appointed to positions in federal agencies. This was the first collective of black people working in higher positions in government. It suggested to voters that the Roosevelt administration cared about black concerns. The group gathered in Mary's office and met informally, rarely keeping minutes. Although as advisors, they did not directly create public policy, they were respected leadership among black voters. They influenced political appointees and disbursed of funds to organizations that would benefit black people.
In 1931, the Methodist Church supported merging of the Daytona Normal and Industrial School of the Cookman College for Men into Bethune-Cookman College, established first as a junior college. Mary became a member of the church, but it was segregated in the South. Essentially, two organizations operated in the Methodist denomination. Mary was prominent in the primarily black Florida Conference. While she worked to integrate the mostly white Methodist Episcopal Church, she protested its initial plans for integration because they proposed separate jurisdictions based on race. When the Supreme Court ruled in Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, that segregation of public schools was unconstitutional, Mary defended the decision by writing in the Chicago Defender that year, open quote, "There can be no divided democracy, no class government, no half-free county under the Constitution. Therefore, there can be no discrimination, no segregation, no separation of some citizens from the rights which belong to all. We are on our way, but these are frontiers which we must conquer. We must gain full equality in education, in the franchise, in the economic opportunity, and full equality in the abundance of life." Close quote. Mary organized the first officer candidate schools for black women.
Well, she was before her time, but the fact that she was dreaming dreams and pushing things that you wouldn't think black women would be thinking about.
She lobbied federal officials, including Roosevelt, on behalf of African American women who wanted to join the military. On May 18, 1955, Mary died of a heart attack. Her death was followed by editorial tributes in African American newspapers across the United States. The Oklahoma City Black Dispatch stated she was, open quote, "exhibit number 1 for all who have faith in America and the democratic process," close quote. The Atlanta Daily World said her life was, open quote, "one of the most dramatic careers ever enacted at any time upon the stage of human activity," close quote. And the Pittsburgh Courier wrote, open quote, "In any race or nation, she would have been an outstanding personality and made a noteworthy contribution because her chief attribute was her indomitable soul," close quote. The mainstream press praised her as well. Christian Century suggested, open quote, "the story of her life should be taught to every school child for generations to come," close quote. The New York Times noted she was one of the most potent factors in the growth of interracial goodwill in America. The Washington Post said, open quote, "so great were her dynamism and force that it was almost impossible to resist her. Not only her own people, but all America has been enriched and ennobled by her courageous, ebullient spirit," close quote. Her hometown newspaper, the Daytona Beach Evening News, printed, open quote, "to some, she seemed unreal, something that could not be. What right had she to greatness? The lesson of Mrs. Mary's life is that genius knows no racial barriers," close quote. On the personal life of Mary Bethune, Mary was described as ebony in complexion. She carried a cane, not for support, but for effect. She said it gave her swank. She was a teetotaler and preached temperance for African Americans, taking opportunities to chastise drunken blacks she encountered in public. Mary said more than once that the school and the students in Daytona were her first family, and that her son and extended family came second. Her students often referred to her as Mama Bethune. She was noted for achieving her goals. Dr. Robert Weaver, who also served in Roosevelt's Black Cabinet, said of her, open quote, "she had the most marvelous gift of effecting feminine helplessness in order to attain her aims with masculine ruthlessness," close quote. When a white Daytona resident threatened Mary's students with a rifle, Mary worked to make an ally of him. The director of the McLeod Hospital recalled, open quote, "Mrs. Bethune treated him with courtesy and developed such goodwill in him that we found him protecting the children and going so far as to say, 'If anybody bothers old Mary, I will protect her with my life,' close quote. Self-sufficiency was a high priority throughout her life. Mary invested in several businesses, including the Pittsburgh Courier, a black newspaper, and many life insurance companies. She founded Central Life Insurance of Florida. She eventually retired in Florida. Due to state segregation, blacks were not allowed to visit the beach. Mary and several other business owners invested in Paradise Beach. They purchased a 2-mile stretch of beach and the surrounding properties, selling these to black families. they did allow white families to visit the waterfront. Paradise Beach was later renamed as Bethune Fallujah Beach in her honor. She also was a 1/4 owner of the Well-Reacher Motel in Daytona, on the legacy and honors of Mary McLeod Bethune. In 1930, journalist Ida Tarbell included Mary as number 10 on her list of America's greatest women. Mary was awarded the Spingarn Medal in 1935 by the NAACP. Also, the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site is in Washington, D.C., and the painting of Mary is on display at the World Methodist Museum, Lake Junaluska, NC. In the 1940s, Mary used her influence and friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt to secure luxury travel buses for Eddie Dunham's All-Star Girls Orchestra, an African-American all-women swing band. Mary was the only black woman present at the founding of the United Nations in San Francisco in 1945, representing the NAACP with W.E.B. Du Bois and Walter White. In 1949, she became the first woman to receive the National Order of Honor and Merit, Haiti's highest award. She served as the U.S. emissary to the induction of President William V.S. Tubman of Liberia in 1949. She also has had essays written about her. She also served as an advisor to 5 of the presidents of the United States. Calvin Coolidge and Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed her to several government positions, which included Special Advisor in Minority Affairs, Director of the Division of Negro Affairs of the National Youth Administration, and Chair of Federal Council of Negro Affairs. Among her honors, she was an Assistant Director of the Women's Army Corps. She was also an honorary member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. In 1973, Mary was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. On July 10, 1974, the anniversary of her 99th birthday, the Mary McLeod Bethune Memorial by artist Robert Burks was erected in her honor in Lincoln Park, Washington, D.C.
When you think about a license plate in her honor, in her memory, one of my main purposes is to make South Carolinians and the world aware of such a great lady and her accomplishment.
She had a journey and a story that she had to tell. And with the license plate, it has a story. And the story would add to her legacy.
I think she, for me, was a powerful symbol. But it seems to me that she was also a window into a time. Here was someone born during Reconstruction, someone who witnessed segregation, someone who witnessed racial violence, but also someone who, from the very beginning, wanted to transcend that.
It was the first monument park in the District of Columbia. At least 18,000 people attended the unveiling ceremony, including Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman elected to Congress. The funds for the monument were raised by the National Council of Negro Women. The inscription on the pedestal reads, open quote, "Let her works praise her," close quote, while the side is engraved with a passage from her, open quote, "Last will and testament. I leave you to love. I leave you to hope. I leave you the challenge of developing confidence in one another. I leave you a thirst for education. I leave you a respect for the use of power. I leave your faith. I leave you racial dignity. I leave you a desire to live harmoniously with your fellow men. I leave you a responsibility to our young people." Close quote. In 1985, the U.S. Postal Service issued a stamp in Mary's honor. In 1989, Ebony magazine listed her as one of 50 most important figures in Black U.S. history. In 1999, Ebony magazine included her as one of the 100 most fascinating Black women of the 20th century. In 1991, the International Astronomical Union named a crater on planet Venus in her honor. In 1994, the National Park Service acquired Mary's last residence, the NACW Council House, at 1318 Vermont Avenue. The former headquarters was designated as the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site. Schools have been named in her honor in Los Angeles, Chicago, San Diego, Dallas, Palm Beach, Florida, Moreno Valley, California, Minneapolis, Lauderdale, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Folkestone and College Park, Georgia, New Orleans, Rochester, New York, Cleveland, South Boston, Virginia, Jacksonville, Florida, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In 2002, scholar Molefi Kete Asante listed Mary McLeod Bethune on his list of 100 greatest African Americans. In 2004, Bethune-Cookman University celebrated its 100th anniversary from its founding as a primary school. The former 2nd Avenue on one side of the university was renamed Mary McLeod Bethune Boulevard. The university's website says, open quote, "The vision of the founder remains in full view over 100 years later. The institution prevails in order that others might improve their heads, hearts, and hands." Close quote. The university's vice president recalled her legacy, open quote, "During Mrs. Bethune's time, this was the only place in the city of Daytona Beach where whites and blacks could sit in the same room and enjoy what she called gems from students, their recitations, and songs. This is a person who was able to bring black people and white together." Close quote. An historical marker in Maysville, Sumter County, South Carolina, commemorates her birthplace. The legislature of Florida in 2018 designated her as the subject of one of Florida's 2 statues in the National Statuary Hall collection, replacing Confederate General Edmund Kirby Smith. She gave various speeches and wrote magazine articles to fight for equal rights for all students. She was the first African-American female to head a federal agency. Mary McLeod Bethune was a determined and courageous hero who was dedicated to education and civil rights. Mary knew that if African-American students received a good education, then they would become successful citizens. She courageously worked to get funding to open a new school for African-American students to learn new skills. This school eventually became known as the Bethune-Cookman University. This school is still open to any person who would like to get an education for any race. And if Mary McLeod Bethune was still alive today, she would be still trying to help people. Her health problems did not stop her from fighting for equal education and civil rights for African Americans. Mary McLeod Bethune was a determined and courageous hero who was dedicated to education and civil rights. This week's edition of People in History salutes a woman who devoted her life to ensuring the right to education and freedom from discrimination for Black Americans. She was an educator, organizer, political activist, and one who opened one of the first schools for African American girls, a woman whom, upon her death, columnist Louise E. Martin said, open quote, "She gave out faith and hope as if they were pills, and she, some sort of doctor." Close quote. Her name, Mary McLeod Bethune.
She took adversity and turned it into a positive because she was always told that she was different. She was born different. She was not a slave, so that made her different. She was very, very dark. That made her different. And she was self-confident and willing to help anybody. That made her different. And it is those differences that made her want to just do whatever it took to make things right. She had this missionary spirit that she took through her entire life. It was amazing how strong a figure she was in her time and how often she's quoted to this day. And the things that she did are things that can be used to coach my own life. As I go through day to day, there's what would Jesus do, but also what would Dr. Bethune do?
This week's edition of People in History was voiced by Naomi Young and Xavier Robert. Scripted and sourced by Jane Uwa and produced by Anthony Asukwa. Among useful sites include biography.com, womenshistory.org, and britannica.com, amongst others.
Um.